My friends all laughed at me behind my back, calling me a spineless doormat. I had been married to Julian Blackwood for 7 years. He cheated on me 8 times, yet I never once picked a fight with him. On Valentine's Day, Julian live-streamed his grand confession to his 9th mistress. That same night, he tossed the divorce papers right in my face. $5 million. That's enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Don't be greedy, Vivian. His new mistress, Chloe, covered her mouth and giggled. Julian, she did iron your suits for 7 years, after all. Why don't you throw in another $100,000 nanny bonus? I kept my head down, biting my tongue hard. It was the only way to stop myself from laughing out loud. Finally. I had survived until the 9th. Before my grandmother passed away, she told me that the women in our family carried a witch's bloodline, specifically meant to punish unfaithful men. For every time a man betrayed a woman of our blood, his lifespan would be cut short by 5 years. Now, his remaining life balance was exactly 6 days. I smiled, stood up, and gently straightened his collar. I agreed to the divorce. But let's wait until after your birthday to sign the papers. After all, a widow doesn't need a divorce certificate. She just needs a death certificate. On Valentine's Day, Julian made the trending page on Instagram yet again. He had rented out the entire city's drone and fireworks show to publicly confess his love to his 9th mistress. That night, his face was cold and detached as he threw the divorce agreement in front of me. $5 million is enough for you. Vivian, I've given you enough respect over the past 7 years. Don't be greedy. His new toy, Chloe, covered her mouth and let out a soft laugh. Julian, your wife did iron your designer suits for 7 years, though. Why don't you give her an extra $100,000 nanny bonus? I kept my head down, biting my tongue as hard as I could. I had to, just to keep myself from laughing out loud. Finally, I had made it to the 9th. Before Grandma Hazel died, she told me that the women of our family possessed a witch's bloodline, and we were born to punish unfaithful men. Every time Julian betrayed me, 5 years of his life were shaved off. I glanced at the calendar. There were only 6 days left until his 35th birthday. His life balance was about to hit 0. I smiled, stood up, and smoothed out his suit collar. I agreed to the divorce, but there's no rush. Let's wait until after your birthday. After all, a widow doesn't need to sign divorce papers. She only needs to file a death certificate. The living room fell dead silent for a few seconds. A flicker of surprise flashed through Julian's eyes. He probably expected me to scream, cry, or throw a tantrum. Or maybe beg him on my knees. But he never expected me to be this calm. And to agree so easily. Chloe was the first to break the silence with a laugh. I guess she just can't bear to let go of the wealth and status you gave her, Julian. The suspicion in Julian's eyes instantly vanished. So that's your little game. He looked down, brushing the spot on his collar where my fingers had touched. Then, he wrapped his arm around Chloe's waist, his voice turning incredibly tender. Of course, you'll be the one accompanying me to my birthday gala. You are the future Mrs. Blackwood, after all. Chloe's eyes lit up, and she stood on her tiptoes to kiss his cheek. Her gaze swept over my wrist, and her voice suddenly turned into a whimper. What's the point of attending? She is still wearing the Blackwood family heirloom emerald bracelet. My fingers tensed slightly. He had personally slid that antique emerald bracelet onto my wrist when we first got married. That year, several elders of the Blackwood family had tried to humiliate me in public. But Julian stood in front of me, blocking them. He took the heirloom bracelet from his mother's hands and put it on me himself. He told everyone that the lady of the Blackwood family would never have to bow her head to anyone. Now, he held out his hand toward me. Take it off. Seeing that I didn't move immediately, Julian's brow furrowed with impatience. Vivian, don't make me have someone force it off you. I lowered my eyes and began to slide the bracelet off. 7 years was a long time. The bracelet had practically adapted to my wrist, and the metal scraped painfully against my skin, drawing a thin line of blood. The moment the bracelet cleared my knuckles, Julian snatched it away. He didn't even look at my bleeding hand. He carefully slid the emerald bracelet onto Chloe's wrist. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. It looks beautiful on you, Chloe. Chloe held her wrist under the light, admiring it for a long time. She shot me a smug, provocative look, then whined to Julian. So, what should the house staff call me from now on? Julian pinched her nose playfully. He gave a cold order to the butler standing nearby. Remember, starting today, you call Miss Sinclair Mrs. Blackwood. Then, he cast a cold glance at me. Move your things to the guest room. Chloe is a light sleeper. Tell the maids to keep it quiet. I stared at this man, the husband I once loved with all my heart. Julian's first affair was 6 years ago. It was on my 26th birthday. He brought a young girl right into our house, right in front of my face. She was young, vibrant, and beautiful. And Julian spoiled her completely. I had forced a smile back then, ignoring the mocking whispers of the guests. I walked up to Julian and whispered, Julian, today is my birthday. No matter what, you shouldn't embarrass me like this on my birthday. He squinted at me and spat out coldly, your birthday? Your party? The next second, he burst into a mocking laugh. Vivian, I pay for everything you wear, eat, and use. Just because people call you Mrs. Blackwood, you think you actually have the right to demand respect from me? I froze on the spot. The bright lights of the ballroom felt like they were burning through me. The whispers around me felt like 1,000 slaps to my face. I didn't blink. I didn't cry. That was the day I realized something. The title, Mrs. Blackwood, was just a piece of charity. It was never love. Julian's impatient voice snapped me back to the present. I looked at him and nodded. Okay. I gathered my things and moved to the guest room. Once inside, I took off the black obsidian pendant from my neck. There were already 8 black veins running through the stone. 6 years ago, on the night of my birthday, he left me to go out with that young girl. I cried all night. When I woke up, the first black vein had appeared on the pendant. That was when I realized what my grandmother said was true. The Vance women have witch blood. We punish the unfaithful. From that day on, I stopped checking his phone. I stopped asking questions. I became the most easygoing wife in Manhattan's high society. I never shed another tear for him. Instead, after every affair, I simply watched another black vein appear on the obsidian stone. 3 years. 5 years. 7 years. And now, the 9th line had finally lit up. Only 6 days left. The next morning, Chloe was dragged mercilessly on Instagram. Internet sleuths had traced her identity through the Valentine's Day fireworks. The comments section was flooded with words like homewrecker and gold digger. By the afternoon, Julian came home early. He threw a printed PR statement on the table in front of me. She's young and cares about her reputation. She's been crying all day. Anyway, we're getting divorced in a few days. Post this from your Instagram account. The statement was short. Mr. Julian Blackwood and I divorced 2 years ago. Miss Chloe Sinclair is not a third party. I wish them the best. I read it coldly, then looked up at him. Julian's eyes flickered. Dating back the divorce by 2 years is good for your reputation, too. I couldn't post this. In 5 days, he would be dead. If I posted this now, it would leave too many loopholes, and I would get dragged into a massive legal and public relations battle after his death. I slid the tablet back to him. None of this is true. I'm not posting it. Julian was silent for a moment. Then, he pulled another document from his leather bag. It was a transfer agreement for an international boarding school in Switzerland. The student name read, Lily Blackwood. My daughter. I stared at him in disbelief. He looked back at me, his eyes icy. The semester starts next month. If you post the statement, I might consider letting her stay. My voice shook. Julian, she is only 6 years old. He avoided my eyes and picked up a glass of water. 6 is the perfect age to build independence. Julian. I stood up, my voice cracking. You promised me you would never take her away from me. That was what he had promised outside the delivery room when Lily was born. I had run a dangerously high fever after giving birth, and he had stayed by my bedside all night, holding our baby girl. Back then, he said our daughter would never be used as a bargaining chip. Now, his hand was pressing down on her transfer papers. He looked at me coldly. I don't want to send her away either. You're forcing my hand. He slid the tablet toward me again. Vivian, I've given you a choice. I stared at him for a few seconds, realizing the bitter truth. His so-called choice was just forcing me to pull the trigger on myself. Fine. I'll post it. I took my phone. I logged into my Instagram account, which had been silent for 7 years, and quickly typed out a post. Miss Sinclair is not a mistress. Julian and I have grown apart, and we have lived separately for a long time. I wish them a lifetime of being locked together. Julian snatched my phone and read the post. The veins on the back of his hand bulged. He slammed the tablet onto my lap. Delete it. Post the draft I gave you. Looking at his furious face, I actually felt a rush of satisfaction. It's too late. People have already screenshotted it. If I delete and repost, it'll only raise more questions. I wrote exactly what you wanted. She's not a mistress, our marriage broke down, and I gave my blessings. Julian, what else do you want? His face darkened. He strode over, grabbed my jaw, and forced me to look up at him. Don't play word games with me. Delaying this until after my birthday won't save this marriage. His grip tightened, but I didn't struggle. I just stared back into his eyes. We've been together for 7 years. There are only 5 days left. Can't you even wait 5 days? His thumb loosened slightly, and he opened his mouth to say something. But then, Chloe's sobbing voice drifted in from the hallway. He immediately let go of me and turned toward the door. Before he left, he stopped. I'll hold off on the boarding school application for now. Then, he added coldly, but whether Lily goes abroad after the divorce, and how many times you get to see her a month, depends entirely on how obedient you are. I threw the transfer agreement into the trash can and watched his retreating back. Don't worry. In 5 days, I won't be holding on to you anymore. When I went to pick Lily up from school, she proudly held up a drawing for me. The drawing showed 3 people holding hands. She was holding my hand and Julian's, and the top of the page read, "Happy birthday, Daddy." Swallowing the bitterness in my throat, I pulled her into my arms and kissed her cheek. "Lily, this is beautiful." We walked into the house, laughing and talking, only to find all my clothes and belongings piled up in a messy heap in the foyer. Chloe was standing in the living room, directing the moving crew to tear down the mattress. "Throw this out, too. Vivian slept on it for 7 years. It's disgusting." Seeing us enter, she stood up, a provocative smirk plastered on her face. "I'm just helping you pack, Vivian. Lest you use your things as an excuse to linger around and refuse to leave in a couple of days." Before I could say a word, Lily rushed forward and grabbed Chloe's arm. "Who are you? Why are you throwing away my mommy's things?" "That's my mommy's bracelet. Give it back to her." Chloe stumbled back, about to snap, but her eyes flickered to the door behind us. Suddenly, she let out a cry and fell to the floor. Julian strode in from behind me and quickly scooped her into his arms. "Chloe." Chloe buried her face in his chest, her shoulders shaking violently. "Julian, I'm so scared." I was just trying to help Vivian pack, and Lily suddenly pushed me. She said I couldn't take her mother's place, and she said she would make sure I never have babies of my own. Lily's face flushed red with anger. "I did not say that. Daddy, she's throwing away mommy's things. And she stole mommy's bracelet." Julian didn't even look at his daughter. Suddenly, he swung his hand and slapped me across the face. My head snapped to the side, my cheek burning with sharp pain. "Mommy!" Lily screamed, throwing herself over me. Julian looked down at me, his eyes filled with pure malice. "Vivian, I warned you yesterday. And today, you're already teaching Lily to lie and bully Chloe. Are you trying to use Lily to force me to stay?" Lily touched my bruised cheek, crying as she tried to hit Julian. "Bad daddy. I hate you." Julian gestured to the maids, his voice cold as ice. "Take her to the basement storage room. She doesn't come out until she apologizes." "Julian." I rushed forward, shielding my daughter. "You can't lock her up." But the maids grabbed Lily, and her terrified screams filled the house. My eyes welled with tears. I grabbed Julian's arm, begging him. "Julian, please, I beg you, don't lock her up." Julian coldly grabbed my wrist and dragged me to Chloe's feet. "Apologize to Chloe, and I'll let her go." Hearing my daughter's voice grow hoarse from crying in the distance, I slowly bent my knees. My spine bent inch by inch. Chloe's designer heels sat right in my line of sight. "I'm sorry, Chloe. I didn't teach my daughter well. Please forgive her." Only then did Julian wave his hand to stop the maids. Lily ran into my arms, her little body cold and trembling, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Julian picked Chloe up in his arms, throwing one last warning over his shoulder before he walked upstairs. "You'd better behave yourself for the next few days. Or else, I won't even wait for the divorce. I'll send Lily straight to Switzerland, and you won't even get to say goodbye." I gently stroked my daughter's trembling back. That night, Lily curled up in my arms, whispering through her tears. "Mommy, does Daddy not want us anymore?" I tucked the blanket around her. On the nightstand lay her drawing for his birthday. She had colored Julian's hand blue because she said it was his favorite color. I folded the drawing and locked it in the drawer. "No, baby." I held her close. "We don't want him anymore." On the calendar, there were only 3 days left until Julian's 35th birthday. This time, I was no longer waiting for him to come back. I was just waiting for his countdown to hit 0. Over the next 3 days, news of Julian and Chloe dominated the tabloids. They were seen trying on luxury evening gowns, attending high society galas, posing for paparazzi. In every single photo, the emerald bracelet on Chloe's wrist was zoomed in and highlighted. The media was already calling her the soon-to-be Mrs. Blackwood. They began speculating when I would officially be kicked out. Julian's birthday gala was held on a massive luxury yacht. The moment my daughter and I arrived, reporters shoved microphones into my face. "Mrs. Blackwood, is it true that you and Julian are divorcing tonight?" I shielded Lily from the flashing cameras and walked past them without looking back. The party was held on the top deck, and almost all of Manhattan's elite had gathered. Chloe, wearing a stunning silver gown, sat right next to Julian. The heirloom emerald bracelet shone brightly on her wrist. I took Lily to a quiet corner. But the whispers of the guests still drifted over to us. "I can't believe Vivian actually showed up. Honestly, she has some thick skin. Anyone else would have hidden in shame. I heard she only got $5 million after 7 years of marriage. Chloe even threw in an extra $100,000 for her." $100,000? She actually accepted that? How embarrassing. Well, if she weren't thick-skinned, how could she have played the role of a trophy wife for 7 years? Lily understood their words. Her eyes welled with tears. She let go of my hand, wanting to go and defend me. But I knelt down and held her shoulders. "Mommy, they're talking bad about you. That's because they want to see me cry, sweetie." "Why?" I stroked her hair and straightened her dress. Because their own lives are miserable, so they can only find joy in other people's pain. She sniffed, wiping her nose, and held my hand tightly again. Soon, the countdown began over the yacht's sound system. Everyone raised their champagne glasses. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Midnight struck. Confetti cannons exploded. Amidst the roaring cheers, Julian blew out his candles and pulled Chloe into a deep kiss. Someone called out, asking when the wedding would be. Julian raised his glass with a smirk. Tomorrow morning. I'll be finishing the paperwork with my ex-wife tonight. He looked at Chloe with absolute devotion. From now on, my birthday will be our wedding anniversary. Chloe's eyes brimmed with tears of joy. The crowd cheered, shouting that they were a match made in heaven. Midnight had passed. Julian wasn't dead. Nothing had happened. But I didn't panic at all. I just looked down at my watch. Julian was born at precisely 12:58 a.m. My grandmother always said that the universe keeps precise books. What time you are due to leave, you leave. Not a second early, not a second late. Julian's personal assistant walked over to me. Mrs. Vance, Julian would like to see you in the VIP cabin. I had the nanny take Lily off the yacht first, waiting until I saw their car safely drive away from the pier. Only then did I follow the assistant into the private suite. Inside, the lawyers had been waiting for a long time. Julian was leaning back on the leather sofa, with Chloe clinging to his arm. Sign it, Julian said, gesturing to the papers with his chin the moment I walked in. We have to go register our marriage at dawn. I picked up the agreement and began flipping through the pages slowly. Julian glanced at his watch, annoyed. What's the point of dragging this out for a few more minutes? I turned another page. Lily's custody isn't mentioned here. Of course she stays with me, Julian replied as if it were a given. And my visitation rights? Depends on how well you behave. I want a specific number of days. Vivian, don't push your luck. I am her mother. Since the day you taught her to lie and push Chloe, you lost the right to call yourself a mother. I looked up. Julian, you lied to me. He sneered, his eyes filled with mockery. An adult's promise is based on leverage, Vivian. You're just too stupid to understand that. I flipped to the final page. Julian set his glass down. There's no point in fighting me on this, Vivian. Besides, there are cameras here, and the lawyers are watching. Once you sign, don't even think about backing out. I met his gaze. That's for the best. The clock ticked to 12:57 a.m. 10 seconds left. I uncapped the pen. Suddenly, Chloe leaned over and whispered maliciously in my ear. If your daughter behaves herself in the future, I might feed her. If she doesn't, well, Switzerland has plenty of room for her. I pressed the pen to the paper and began to write my name. Julian reached for his own pen. Before I could even finish writing the first letter of my name, the smile on Julian's face froze. His entire body went rigid, and he collapsed face first onto the glass table. Chloe's blood-curdling scream pierced through the cabin. The grandfather clock in the VIP cabin let out a dull, brassy chime as the second hand swept past the 12:58 a.m. The heavy fountain pen fell from Julian's fingers, rolling across the mahogany desk before leaving a streak of black ink across the crisp white divorce papers. His face did not contort into agony or panic. Instead, it went utterly slack, as if someone had snipped the invisible strings holding up a marionette. His eyes, fixed on the glass coffee table, turned dull and milky in an instant. The breath rushed out of his lungs in a single, rattling wheeze, the sound of an empty bellows collapsing inward, and his upper body pitched forward. Crack. His forehead struck the thick plate glass tabletop. The crystal tumbler he had been holding tumbled from his limp hand, spilling amber scotch across the unsigned settlement. For 2 full seconds, the only sound in the room was the low, steady thrum of the yacht's twin diesel engines beneath the floorboards. Then Chloe let out a scream that seemed to tear her vocal cords. Julian. Julian, get up. She leaped off the armrest, her silver gown rustling violently as she grabbed his shoulders, trying to haul him backward. Julian's heavy frame slid sideways, his cheek coming to rest against the edge of the glass. His lips were already taking on a faint, dusky blue tint. Julian. Stop playing. Stop joking around. The lead divorce attorney, a sharp-featured man named Miller who had spent the last hour treating me like an inconvenient nuisance, dropped his leather briefcase. Mr. Blackwood? Mr. Blackwood, can you hear me? Miller lunged forward, pressing 2 trembling fingers against Julian's carotid artery. I did not move. I did not scream. I did not flinch. Beneath the collar of my high-necked silk blouse, the obsidian pendant pressed flat against the hollow of my throat. It was no longer icy cold. For the first time in 7 years, the stone burned with a fierce, radiant heat, as though an ember had caught fire inside its core. 9. 9 black veins, etched into the dark stone by 9 separate betrayals. 5 years for the first girl in our penthouse, 5 years for the gallery director. In Paris, 5 years for the intern, 5 years for the pop star, 5 years for the heiress, 5 years for the model in Milan, 5 years for the PR manager. 5 years for the actress, 5 years for Chloe. 45 years. Julian had been 35 years old, blessed with the robust genetics of an athletic patriarch line destined to live well into their 80s. 80 minus 45 equals 35. The universe does not make rounding errors. Call the ship's medic. Miller shouted at the bodyguard standing frozen by the double doors. Get the medic in here right now. Call the Coast Guard. Julian, look at me. Look at me. Chloe was hysterical now, shaking him with both hands, her manicured nails digging into the lapels of his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. Julian, the papers. The papers aren't signed yet. We're supposed to get married tomorrow. The legal team scrambled in pure chaos. The younger associate knocked over a chair trying to get to the cabin intercom. Miller fell to his knees, ripping open Julian's crisp dress shirt, sending mother-of-pearl buttons flying across the carpet as he began frantic, awkward chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. I calmly capped my pen with a soft, decisive click. I reached across the table, took the divorce agreement soaked in $5,000 scotch, folded it neatly into quarters, and slid it inside my leather handbag. What are you doing? Chloe shrieked at me, tears cutting black mascara tracks down her powdered cheeks. He's dying. Do something, you cold-hearted bitch. Call an ambulance. The attorney already called them, I said softly, standing up and smoothing down the pleats of my skirt. And there is nothing anyone can do. You knew. Chloe's voice cracked into a wild register. Her eyes darted from Julian's graying face to mine. What did you do to him? You poisoned his drink. You poisoned the scotch. The scotch was poured by his personal assistant from a sealed bottle Julian chose himself. Miller gasped between compressions, his forehead drenched in sweat. Don't talk, keep clear. The heavy cabin doors were kicked open. 2 shipboard paramedics rushed in, carrying an automated external defibrillator, AED, and emergency oxygen. Clear the room. Step back. They shoved Miller aside, ripping Julian's shirt completely open, slapping the sticky electrode pads onto his pale, hairless chest. The machine whirred, its synthesized voice echoing in the confined cabin, analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient. 3 seconds of agonizing silence hung in the room. No shock advised. Pulse absent. Continue CPR. The lead paramedic immediately took over chest compressions, his arms locking straight, his weight bearing down with violent regularity. Julian's head bobbed limply with each thrust, his vacant eyes staring at the ceiling chandelier. Unblinking. Chloe fell to her knees by the sofa, sobbing violently, clutching the emerald bracelet on her wrist as if it were a life raft. Julian, please, you promised me. You promised we'd go to Capri next week. You promised me the penthouse. I stood by the doorway, watching the spectacle with the quiet, detached calm of an undertaker. Around my neck, the obsidian pendant suddenly ceased burning. The heat drained away in an instant, leaving the stone smooth, cool, and completely, perfectly black. The 9 veins had dissolved into the body of the rock, consumed by the darkness. Grandmother Hazel's voice, rough with the dry rasp of age and ancient soil, echoed in the back of my mind. A debt paid in blood leaves no receipt, Vivian. When the ledger closes, the widow inherits the earth, and the fool inherits 6 feet of dirt. 10 minutes later, the Coast Guard team arrived via speed launch. The emergency physician knelt beside Julian, shone a penlight into both fixed, dilated pupils, checked his femoral pulse, and looked up at the room. Time of death, the doctor said, glancing at his tactical watch, 1:12 a.m. Suspected massive acute cardiac arrest. Chloe collapsed into a heap of silver silk on the floor, wailing. The lead attorney, Miller, leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, his eyes widening as the catastrophic realization hit him. He turned his head slowly, looking past Chloe's crumbled form, past the body on the floor, until his gaze landed squarely on me. Mrs. Blackwood, he whispered, his voice trembling. I looked at him with clear, calm eyes. Yes, Mr. Miller. The agreement, he stammered, swallowing hard. You hadn't finished signing. And Mr. Blackwood. He hadn't executed his part. I know, I said gently. Under New York law, and under the terms of the Blackwood Family Testamentary Trust of 2018. Miller's voice trailed off into a hollow croak. The divorce was never completed. You are his legal widow. You are the sole surviving Spouse. I adjusted the strap of my handbag over my shoulder and glanced down at Julian's cold, still face one last time. Call the coroner, I said. And prepare the probate filings for tomorrow morning. By 6 a.m., the yacht was docked at Chelsea Piers, surrounded by flashing red and blue police cruisers, private security barricades, and a swarm of paparazzi. That looked like a wall of hungry vultures. The news had hit the wire services before Julian's body had even been loaded into the medical examiner's van. Breaking, tech tycoon Julian Blackwood passes away suddenly at 35 during birthday gala. Blackwood Industries shares plunge in pre-market trading. Who inherits the $4.2 billion empire? I sat in the back of a private Mercedes Maybach parked inside the cordoned-off VIP terminal. Lily was sitting beside me, still half asleep, clutching her favorite plush rabbit to her chest. She had woken up when the house nanny brought her back to the city, confused by the sirens and the dark circles under everyone's eyes. Mommy, Lily whispered, rubbing her eyes. Where is Daddy? Did he like my drawing? I reached out, gently smoothing the stray strands of hair from her forehead. Her skin was warm, vibrant with life, the pure, untainted blood of the Vance women flowing through her small veins. Daddy had to go away on a very long journey, sweetheart, I told her, my voice steady and soothing. He won't be coming back. She looked at me for a long moment. Children know more than adults give them credit for. She had seen the cruel glint in her father's eyes when he locked her away, and she had felt the sting of his indifference for years. She didn't cry. She just leaned her head against my arm and nestled into my side. Does that mean nobody is going to send me to Switzerland? She asked. My heart tightened, not with grief, but with an iron resolve that felt as old as the earth itself. Nobody, I said firmly. Never again. A sudden commotion erupted outside the car window. A black town car had pulled up right against the barricades, and Chloe Sinclair came tumbling out. She had changed out of her silver evening gown into a sharp black designer trench coat and oversized dark sunglasses, but she had not washed off the smeared makeup beneath them. Surrounded by 3 personal assistants and a private publicist she had hired overnight, she pushed past the reporters, heading straight toward the police perimeter where Julian's belongings were being catalogued. Excuse me. I am Julian Blackwood's fiancé, she screamed at the NYPD officers holding the tape. I have the right to accompany his personal effects. We lived together. I am the head of his household. The reporters surged forward, their cameras flashing in a relentless strobing storm. Miss Sinclair. Is it true you were engaged tonight? Did Mr. Blackwood sign a will before he collapsed? Were the divorce papers finalized with Vivian Blackwood? Julian loved me. Chloe shouted into the bank of microphones, her voice cracking with calculated drama. We were supposed to register our marriage this morning. Vivian Vance held him hostage for 7 years for his money, but Julian's heart belonged to me. I am his rightful partner, and I will be defending his legacy. I lowered the window of the Maybach by 2 inches. The cool, salty morning air of the Hudson River drifted into the car, carrying with it the frantic stench of human desperation. Arthur, I spoke to my driver, an older man named Arthur Vance who was my late grandmother's second cousin, one of the few family members who knew the true weight of our name. Yes, Vivian. Open the door. I stepped out of the vehicle. I wore no makeup, no sunglasses, and no morning veil. Just a tailored charcoal cashmere coat, flat leather boots, and the simple black obsidian pendant resting against my neck. The moment my foot touched the pavement, the roar of the press corps died down by half. Mrs. Blackwood. Vivian. Is it true you refused to sign the divorce papers? I did not answer a single question. I did not look at the cameras. I walked with slow, deliberate steps toward the police cordon where Chloe stood. When Chloe saw me coming, her expression twisted into a snarl of pure venom. She ripped off her sunglasses. You. She hissed, taking 2 aggressive steps toward me before Arthur stepped up beside me, his broad, weathered frame blocking her path. You think you won? Because his heart gave out 5 minutes too early? I have the texts, Vivian. I have the video of his proposal. I have the records showing he gave me his family's apartment. Miss Sinclair, I said, my voice level and quiet, carrying effortlessly over the hum of the idling squad cars. You have a collection of promises from a dead man who lied to every woman he ever met. Nothing more. I have his ring, she screamed, thrusting her left hand forward, showing off a massive 5-carat diamond. And I have this. She raised her right arm, pulling back the sleeve of her trench coat to reveal the antique emerald bracelet. The deep green stones caught the gray morning light. The intricate gold filigree, forged over a century ago in Florence for the first Mrs. Blackwood. Looked grotesque on her trembling, sweaty wrist. He gave this to me with his own hands. Chloe spat, her eyes wild. He told me. The lady of the Blackwood family wears this. He took it off you and gave it to me. You'll never get it back. The reporters were recording every second, their lenses zooming in on the jewelry. A senior detective from the NYPD Manhattan South Homicide Task Force, called in. As standard procedure for high-profile sudden deaths, stepped between us, holding a clipboard. Ladies, please. This is an active scene until the medical examiner issues a preliminary certificate. Detective, I said, turning to him with cold politeness. Miss Sinclair is currently wearing an unregistered asset belonging exclusively to the Blackwood Family Testamentary Trust. Chloe shrieked, it was a gift. A personal gift. The Blackwood family heirloom collection, I continued calmly, was legally catalogued under Trust Schedule C in 1982. By Clause 14 of the indenture. All core family jewelry is inalienable trust property. It cannot be gifted, sold, or transferred by any individual trustee, including Julian, without a unanimous vote of the Board of Executors. It belongs strictly to the lawful living spouse of the primary heir. I turned my eyes back to Chloe. You are not his spouse, Chloe. You never were. You were a temporary guest in his bed. You lying bitch. Take it off, I said. The words were not loud, but they carried an ancient, crushing authority that made the air between us feel heavy. Chloe flinched, stepping back as if slapped. I won't. You can sue me for it. If you do not remove it right now, I said, I will have Detective Miller and the corporate legal team file immediate charges for grand larceny in the first degree before the Manhattan District Attorney's office opens at 9 o'clock. You will be arrested on this pier, in front of every television camera in New York. Chloe looked around in sheer terror. Her publicist took a step back, suddenly checking his phone and disassociating himself from her. Her assistants looked down at the ground. The reporters smelled blood in the water, their shutter click sounding like the rapid cocking of 100 guns. You can't do this to me. Chloe whimpered, her bravado shattering into pathetic, desperate fragments. Julian loved me, he hated you. Julian is dead, I replied softly. And the dead do not write checks. Her hands shook so violently that she could barely unhook the safety clasp. The emerald bracelet caught on her knuckle, just as it had caught on mine 3 nights ago. But unlike me, who had borne the scrape in silence, Chloe let out a sharp cry as the metal tore her skin, drawing a thin bead of scarlet blood. She ripped it free and held it out, her face pale with humiliation and defeat. I did not touch her. I held out a clean white linen handkerchief from my coat pocket. Drop it. Chloe dropped the heirloom into the center of the linen. I folded the corners over the heavy stones, tucked it securely into my pocket, and turned my back on her without another word. Arthur, I said as I climbed back into the Maybach beside my daughter. Take us home. We have a board meeting at 10. At 9 a.m., while Manhattan was choking on morning traffic and Wall Street was attempting to stabilize Blackwood Industries stock, I sat in the sterile consultation room of the New York City office of the chief medical examiner on First Avenue. Across the stainless steel accented desk sat Dr. Marcus Thorne, a veteran forensic pathologist with 30 years of experience dissecting the city's most complicated deaths. In front of him lay Julian's preliminary autopsy folder. Mrs. Blackwood, Dr. Thorne began, adjusting his half-moon reading glasses. I understand this must be an extraordinary shock for you. I am holding up, doctor, I said. What did you find? Thorne opened the file, frowning deeply at the glossy macro photographs and histological slides clipped inside. To be frank with you, Mrs. Blackwood, in all my years of practice, I have never seen a pathology report quite like this on a 35-year-old male with no prior medical history. Was there poison? I asked evenly. Miss Sinclair made several loud accusations to the press this morning. We ran a full comprehensive toxicology screen, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, testing for over 400 common and exotic toxins, heavy metals, cardiac glycosides, synthetic opioids, and paralytics, Dr. Thorne said, tapping a red stamped sheet. The results were completely, unequivocally clean. There was a moderate blood alcohol level of 0.08 from the scotch, but nothing toxic. No drugs. No foul play. He paused, leaning forward, his frown deepening. What killed your husband was acute myocardial infarction coupled with catastrophic multivessel coronary atherosclerosis and diffuse myocardial fibrosis. I kept my hands folded neatly in my lap. In plain English, doctor? In plain English, his heart was 80 years old. Dr. Thorne shook his head, turning a slide toward me. His left anterior descending artery was over 95% occluded with dense, calcified plaque. His cellular telomeres in the cardiac tissue showed extreme degradation. The cellular damage, the arterial stiffening, the elasticity loss in his aortic arch. It looks like the anatomy of an 80-year-old man who lived through 40 years of severe congestive heart failure. But according to his private physician's records from 3 months ago, his stress test was flawless. Dr. Thorne looked at me, bewildered, searching my face for answers the medical literature could not provide. Biologically speaking, Mrs. Blackwood, it is as if your husband's cardiovascular system aged 50 years in the span of an instant. Medically, we have to rule it an idiosyncratic, accelerated genetic cardiac event. Legally, the death is ruled entirely natural. He signed the bottom of the certificate with a heavy black marker and slid a certified copy across the desk. Cause of death, natural causes/acute myocardial infarction. Thank you, doctor, I said, picking up the paper. That is all I needed to know. Mrs. Blackwood? Dr. Thorne called out as I stood to leave. I stopped at the doorway. Yes? The old doctor took off his glasses, looking genuinely disturbed. Do you have any family history of this? On his side? I offered him a faint, sorrowful smile. Julian's family always had a weakness for things they couldn't afford, I said. Quietly. He simply ran out of credit. At 10:15 a.m., the elevator doors opened onto the 62nd floor of the Blackwood Tower in Midtown Manhattan. The air in the executive corridor was thick with panic. Phones were ringing off. The Hook secretaries were frantically fielding calls from institutional shareholders, and television monitors mounted on the marble walls were broadcasting live financial panels analyzing the crash of Blackwood Industries stock. As I walked down the long carpeted hallway toward the boardroom, heads snapped in my direction. Employees who had ignored me for 7 years, who had treated me like Julian's invisible, boring housewife while whispering about his latest glamorous mistresses, froze in their tracks. I was no longer wearing the muted beige cashmere of a neglected wife. I wore a tailored black double-breasted suit with structured shoulders. Around my left wrist, polished and gleaming against my skin, was the antique emerald bracelet. And resting flat on my collar was the black obsidian stone. Arthur walked half a step behind me, carrying 2 heavy leather briefcases containing 70 years of Blackwood family legal trusts and Vance estate documentation. I pushed open the double oak doors of the boardroom. The room fell instantly silent. Seated around the 30-foot Brazilian rosewood table were the 12 members of the board of directors, Julian's senior corporate attorneys, and the Blackwood family elders. At the head of the table sat Julian's uncle, Richard Blackwood, a 60-year-old corporate raider with silver hair, sharp predatory eyes, and a lifetime of resentment toward his late nephew for holding the majority stake. Beside Richard sat Chloe Sinclair. She had somehow managed to get past lobby security, her face washed clean. Wearing a modest navy dress, seated next to Richard's personal counsel. Vivian, Richard said, not bothering to stand. His voice was dripping with condescension. We didn't expect you to show up. In fact, we were just drafting a press release on behalf of the family offering our condolences. You should be at home with Lily. This is my home, Richard, I said, walking to the foot of the table. Or rather, it is my office. Chloe let out a sharp, trembling scoff. You have no right to be here, Richard. And the board have already agreed that Julian's sudden passing requires immediate stability. Julian intended to appoint Richard as interim chairman, and he executed a power of attorney for me regarding his personal estates. She slapped a typed document onto the table. I didn't even glance at it. I pulled out the high-backed leather chair opposite Richard and sat down. Arthur placed the briefcases on the table and snapped the brass locks open. Mr. Miller, I addressed the lead divorce attorney who was sitting in the corner, looking pale and thoroughly exhausted. Did you bring the file? Miller stood up nervously, adjusting his tie. Yes, Mrs. Blackwood. Wait a minute, Richard barked, slamming his palm on the table. Miller was Julian's personal counsel. He works for the estate. Miller works for the Blackwood Testamentary Trust, I corrected calmly. Which, as of 1:12 a.m. this morning, answered to the primary executor. Julian divorced you. Chloe screamed, her voice echoing off the glass windows. He gave you $5 million. We were in that cabin to finish it. I reached into my handbag, pulled out the scotch-stained, folded document from the yacht, and slid it down the length of the rosewood table. It stopped right in front of Richard. Examine page 24, Richard, I said. The signature line for Vivian Vance Blackwood is blank. The signature line for Julian Blackwood contains only a single stray ink mark made when his heart stopped. Richard grabbed the paper, his eyes scanning the lines frantically. His knuckles turned white. Furthermore, I continued, Julian's personal will, executed in 2017 shortly after our daughter's birth, states explicitly in Article 4, in the event of my death, all voting shares, controlling equity in Blackwood Industries, representing 51.4% of total outstanding common stock, and all residential real estate holdings shall pass entirely to my lawful spouse, Vivian Vance Blackwood, as sole trustee for our issue, Lily Blackwood. He made a new will. Chloe cried out, grabbing Richard's arm. Richard, tell her. Julian told me he made a new will leaving the Tribeca penthouse and 30% of the shares to me. Richard's face was turning a mottled, furious purple. He looked over at Miller. Miller, where is the updated draft? Miller wiped his brow with a handkerchief. The new testamentary instrument was prepared last week, Mr. Richard. But Mr. Julian refused to sign it until the divorce from Mrs. Vivian was finalized. He said he didn't want two competing wills active at the same time. The new will was never executed. Which means, I said, leaning back in my chair, it is nothing more than scrap paper. The boardroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. The other board members, men who had made billions off Julian's reckless tech expansions, began exchanging nervous glances. They were pragmatists. They didn't care about mistresses, fireworks shows, or high society gossip. They cared about voting power. And I now held 51.4% of the voting power in my hands. You can't run this company, Vivian, Richard sneered, trying to rally his dignity. You're a housewife. You don't know the first thing about our European logistics expansion, our debt covenants, or our institutional creditors. You'll tank the stock before the market closes on Friday. Julian was the one who tanked the stock, I replied, my voice slicing through his bluster like a scalpel. He spent $400 million of company liquidity over the last 3 years propping up failing venture funds owned by his mistress's brothers. I motioned to Arthur, who pulled a thick stack of financial audits from the briefcase and dealt them around the table like playing cards. Julian's lifestyle was financed through illegal corporate loan guarantees, I said, including a $12 million shell company registered in Delaware under the name Sinclair Holdings LLC. Chloe froze. The color drained from her face until she looked more like a corpse. Then Julian did. What is that? She stammered. That, I said, looking directly into her wide, panicked eyes, is the entity. Julian used to buy your $3 million apartment in Miami, your jewelry collection, and your mother's house in Aspen. All paid for with Blackwood Industries operational capital, flagged by our forensic accountants 3 hours ago as unauthorized corporate embezzlement. Julian gave that to me. Julian had no legal authority to give away corporate assets without board approval, I said. As the new chairman of the board and controlling shareholder, I have already instructed our forensic team to file an emergency freeze on all assets associated with Sinclair Holdings LLC. The federal marshals will be serving the seizure notices at noon. Chloe stood up so fast her chair fell backward with a loud crash. You're ruining me. You're taking everything. I'm not taking anything from you, Chloe, I said softly. I am simply returning what you stole to my daughter's trust fund. Richard. Help me. Chloe pleaded, grabbing Richard's shoulder. You promised. You'd protect me. You said if I backed you for chairman, you'd make sure I got my payout. Richard shoved her hand off his arm with undisguised disgust. Get out of here, Chloe, Richard muttered, not even looking at her. You have no business in this room. Chloe stood there for 3 agonizing seconds, exposed and utterly abandoned in front of Manhattan's most powerful executives. She let out a dry, broken sob, covered her face with her hands, and fled the boardroom, her designer heels clicking frantically down the corridor until the elevator chime swallowed her whole. I watched the doors close behind her, then turned my attention back to the table. Now, I said, resting my forearms on the rosewood surface, the emeralds catching the recessed spotlights overhead. Item 1 on the agenda, the immediate removal of Richard Blackwood from the Executive Committee for gross fiduciary negligence. All those in favor? I raised my right hand. The remaining board members, seeing the absolute shift in power, did not hesitate for a single second. One by one, 9 hands went up around the table. Richard stared at his former allies in disbelief, his mouth hanging open. Meeting adjourned, I said. You have until 5 o'clock to clear your desk. Richard. That evening, I did not return to the Manhattan penthouse with its sterile glass walls and the lingering scent of Julian's expensive cologne. I had Arthur drive Lily and me 2 hours north, deep into the Hudson Valley, to the ancestral home of the Vance family, a stone farmhouse surrounded by 300 100 acres of ancient, overgrown oak and hemlock trees. This was where Grandmother Hazel had lived, where my mother had lived, and where 7 generations of Vance women had been born. The house smelled of dried lavender, beeswax, and damp cedar. After tucking Lily into the high feather bed in the guest room, where she fell asleep within minutes, exhausted from the whirlwind of the last 24 hours, I walked down the creaking wooden stairs to the root cellar beneath the kitchen. The cellar was lined with rough-hewn fieldstone. In the center of the room sat an old oak harvest table, upon which rested a heavy, iron-bound wooden chest. I took the obsidian pendant from around my neck. In the dim glow of the oil lamp, the stone was cool and completely smooth. I opened the iron chest. Inside were 9 smaller obsidian stones, each resting in its own velvet-lined compartment, dating back over 2 centuries. Grandmother Hazel had explained the ledger to me when I was just a girl of 18, standing in this very room. The men of the world believe they rule by contract and coin, she had told me, her gnarled fingers tracing the ancient stone. They take wives to build dynasties, and they break their vows because they believe women are weak vessels, meant to endure humiliation in silence. But the Vance blood was bound to the old earth before this city was ever built. We do not pick fights. We do not hire private detectives. We do not scream in ballrooms. The magic does not respond to petty anger or vindictive malice. It only answers to the true, broken covenant. When a man swears before the earth and his blood to cherish you, and then turns his back to lie in the arms of another, he forfeits 5 years of his mortal breath. If he betrays you once and repents, he lives to an old age, slightly diminished. But if he is a glutton who treats women like disposable ornaments, the stone will collect every last hour he possesses. I looked at the obsidian in my palm. 7 years. For the first year of our marriage, before the power and the wealth corrupted him, Julian had looked at me with what I truly believed was love. He had stood before his arrogant family and slid the emerald bracelet onto my wrist, swearing that no one would ever make me bow my head. Perhaps, in some small corner of his shallow heart, he had meant it then. But power without character is a rot that eats men alive. When the money poured in, the respect vanished. He forgot that the title, Mrs. Blackwood, was not a favor he had bestowed upon me, it was a shield I had allowed him to hold. He had traded his life away, piece by piece, affair by affair, for the cheap thrills of Manhattan penthouses, yacht parties, and the hollow flattery of gold diggers. I placed my obsidian pendant into the 10th empty compartment in the wooden chest. The moment the stone touched the velvet, a faint, golden chime resonated through the cellar, a sound like a distant bell ringing across a winter meadow. The pitch-black surface of the stone cleared, turning into a brilliant, translucent, smoky quartz, clear and untainted. The debt was paid. The ledger was balanced. The curse had returned to rest. I closed the heavy iron lid and turned the brass key in the lock. 6 months passed. The world moves on with terrifying speed, especially in New York. Julian Blackwood's sudden death had become a footnote in business school case studies on corporate governance and trust structures. The sensational headlines faded, replaced by new scandals and new fortunes. Under my leadership and a newly appointed, professional board of independent trustees, Blackwood Industries was restructured. We sold off the bloated tech entertainment divisions, liquidated the vanity venture funds, and refocused the capital into clean energy infrastructure, medical research, and educational grants. The $12 million embezzlement suit against Chloe Sinclair was settled out of court. She was forced to surrender the Miami condominium, the Aspen chalet, the luxury cars, and every piece of jewelry Julian had bought her with corporate funds. The press photographed her moving back into her parents' modest split-level house in suburban New Jersey, carrying her own luggage, unadorned and completely forgotten by the society circles that had once toasted her on Valentine's Day. On a warm Saturday morning in September, I took Lily to Central Park. The autumn leaves were just beginning to turn amber and gold along the edges of the great lawn. The air was crisp and sweet. Lily was sitting on a checkered blanket, wearing a bright yellow cardigan, her sketchbook open in her lap. "Mommy," she said, looking up with bright, clear eyes. "Look what I found in my old memory box yesterday." She held up the drawing she had made for Julian's 35th birthday, the one showing the 3 of us holding hands, with Julian's hand colored in bright blue. A year ago, seeing that paper would have made my throat tighten with unspeakable sorrow. Now, looking at it under the warm September sun, I felt nothing but a profound, tranquil stillness. "Do you still want to keep it, Lily?" I asked gently, sitting beside her on the grass. She looked at the drawing for a long time, tilting her head. "Daddy didn't want to hold our hands," she said simply, with the piercing clarity only a child possesses. "He wanted to hold other things." "Yes, baby," I said. "He did." Can we make it into a plane? I smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea. Together, our fingers worked the paper, folding the corners down, creasing the wings sharp and straight, tucking the nose into a clean, aerodynamic point. Lily stood up on the crest of the hill, overlooking the pond where the little wooden sailboats glided across the water. She pulled her arm back, took a deep breath of the free morning air, and threw the paper airplane with all her might. The plane caught a sudden upward draft, lifting high above the grass, banking smoothly toward the open water. The drawing of the three figures, the blue-colored hand, and the broken promises soared across the sky until it touched down gently on the surface of the pond, carried away by the current. Lily didn't watch it sink. She turned around, laughing, and ran straight into my open arms. I caught her, swinging her around in the sunlight, the antique emerald bracelet on my wrist chiming softly against the buttons of my coat, no longer a symbol of Julian's charity, but a testament to an unbroken lineage of women who survived every storm. I kissed my daughter's cheek and held her close. The past was buried. The debt was settled. And the future belonged entirely to us.